When you decide to do some woodland management on your property, there's so many tools in the toolbox, a management toolbox, that we can pick from. And one thing is timber stand improvement, and more specifically, doing some crop tree release or oak release on your property and the value that can be achieved by doing that type of management, the strategy. And one thing about oak is an oak tree provides so much life for it that we kind of take for granted. Just the tree itself, the value of wildlife, the value that it gives wildlife, is absolutely incredible. From spiders to insects to beetles, and then the game animals that we know, the squirrels, the bears, raccoons, deer, turkey, it just all survives on an oak tree. And why not go in there and do some management to make that tree even healthier? And when we do that, we produce more mast, which is more acorns. And when we do that, the species of wildlife that is dependent on that is unbelievable, from obviously the game species, but from caterpillars, from moss, a whole nother ecosystem of animals and life, that by releasing these trees, the value that we're going to get from it, other than just from the hunting aspect, is absolutely, incredible. And just simply by giving it more sun and simply by giving it more room. This thing right here, this acorn, the simple acorn, what it does for wildlife. It's crazy. Well, here we are in the state of Virginia, and Cody and I were driving around this piece of property of his, and he pointed out this white oak, and we thought this would be a perfect place to talk about what a crop tree release and the value of that type of management tool. Now, timber stand improvement is basically going into your woods, picking out the better timber, and this is a quick and dirty version of it. Going in, picking out the better timber, releasing it to competition so those trees can grow for future harvest and produce a little bit of wildlife value as well. But a crop tree release is picking, oak trees, fruit trees, etc., and releasing the competition, letting sunlight hit that tree, because that's all it really is. You just have to think sun, and they need room to grow. And when you decide to do a crop tree release, you have to make a decision. Do I want it to be strictly timber value so the tree can grow bigger? Or is it strictly wildlife value? And in this case, this tree behind me in this management area that Cody and his family did, it was strictly a wildlife decision. And that's why, how can I tell that, is that he really gave this tree a lot of space. And more space means more branching, which means more acorns for wildlife. Looking at a tree like this is somewhat of a mature white oak. And what's amazing about this tree is that at maturity, in its whole lifetime, it could produce up to 3 million acorns. Absolutely insane. But on top of that, yes, the value of that, the acorn production, the future timber harvest that could be done, but it's necessarily, when you look around, and we're going to point some things out to you, is that there's life at this site. And when we usually go in and do this, it's all about this tree. When actually what you did from the time you cut it and walked away, it was doing its job. And for example, let's walk over here. In this site, you see a lot of stumps, obviously from him cutting. And what happens, you have all these mineral. It's basically, we call this a mineral stump, all this sprouting. And when you have a good sized trees, like these are somewhat, you have all that energy from the root system going up into all these sprouts, which these sprouts right here, they are full of mineral, they are full of energy for wildlife, but more specifically white-tailed deer. And then what you look too, in this site, because of the sunlight hitting the forest floor, we have briars starting to grow, which is, your rubus species that can be up to 20-something% protein, high value. And then as it gets thicker, we're looking at nesting wildlife, rabbits, birds, etc., turkeys. And then right here, when we look around, we're having grasses. We're having forbs. Forbs and grasses are starting to come strictly by releasing this oak tree. And here you thought you were just cutting it to produce more acorns. We're producing life. And what's funny, when we go, let's walk up here, you're going to see the difference between closed canopy and open canopy. So let's go up here. There's a little bit of briar. There's some greenbrier here because the timber, there's some greenbrier because the timber is a little bit young, so the sunlight can come in here. But really, there is no forest. There is no grasses here. There's nothing. It's a biological desert, really. And how Cody cut this is very cool because he cut trees completely off, and you have that stump sprouting, which is beneficial for white-tailed deer. And then there's some trees that he double girdled, herbicide, so he can kill them. So he's diversified his cuts. What those dead trees, that might, to you and I, just be dead. But for wildlife, it's amazing because those trees will produce insects, bugs, which attract birds, which attract like woodpeckers and stuff to create cavities, cavity nesting for squirrels, owls, you name it. So it's a whole ecosystem, basically just by releasing an oak tree. Absolutely amazing. Pretty cool. One thing that we don't talk about enough is when we do these things and we walk away and we see all this, you know, stuff happening, is the maintenance of it. We don't talk enough about that. And the maintenance of it is really, it's not that difficult, because what's going to happen is that this oak tree, obviously what's going to happen is more branching, more acorns, but the surrounding trees that did not get cut, what are they going to do? They're going to do the same thing because they were rewarded that sun and room. So really all we have to do is just keep an eye looking up, not the ground, but looking up and seeing what tree is starting to really compete with that. Now we're talking about wildlife again, not necessarily timber value. So we might have to keep doing a little bit of maintenance on the outside of the site. So just something to pay attention to. So just little minor maintenance things just to keep an eye on so the site can continue to do its job. As you decide to do some crop tree release or oak release on your property, you might come across a stand like where we're at now, where there's a variety of oaks. It's nothing but oak trees. There's white oaks, like this tree, there's red oaks, there's chestnut oaks. And that's a great situation to be in. And a lot of people automatically would want to come in here and just release the white oak because, you know, white oak is a little bit considered decaying because it's a little bit sweeter, it drops earlier. But the problem with that is you're not adding diversity to this woodland area here. There's so many things that's kind of wrong here. We have a little bit of a closed canopy, so we do need to do some releasing. But again, going back to what tree to cut, what tree to save, we want diversity. We want to release the red oak. We want to release the chestnut oak. Each one of those oaks has value to it. And when you have a bunch of diversity of acorns on your property, what's that mean? Obviously, wildlife is going to utilize your property longer and use it more altogether. And you're looking around here, we do have diversity. We have buck rubs here. Some reason Cody didn't kill that buck, but hey, neither here or there. So it's just, you want diversity, you want those cuts. Now, like right here, we have this white oak. Now, white oak, again, a little bit sweeter acorn. They drop first, but the problem with the white oak is that as soon as they hit the floor, in due time, they start to germinate. And then they won't, you know, produce a tree necessarily to leaf out until the first spring. So again, it's a little bit on the short-term side. But then we walk over here, we got some red oak, okay? We got some red oak family, that is. And then we want that, release this tree because of acorns. They might not be so palatable right off the get-go because they're a little bit on the acidic side. But this time of year, January, February, March, they're the ticket. And for turkeys and for deer and other wildlife species too, squirrels, birds, the usage is there. There's food for wildlife basically all through the stressful times of the year. Same thing with chestnut oak. We got some chestnut oak up here. Again, a very valuable acorn producing tree. Again, it has a lot of value to the acorn, but mostly it's diversity that we're looking at. And how do we decide? Again, we know all that, but how do we decide, you know, who to cut, who to save? And let's kind of go back down here. Let me show you a quick example of playing judge and jury. So we have this red oak, and when you look up, okay, it does have a little bit of a canopy, so it's producing acorns. Now we come over here to this white oak, its competitor, and when you look at it, the canopy is just kind of, ugh, okay? This is a good tree to cut, and if this was my place, I would cut this tree, especially for the timber value. And then also, it's going to release the red oak tree and give it more room to grow, the sunlight, the competition. This canopy here is junk, so judge and jury, this guy's out. So basically just looking up and who is the winner, who has a little bit better crown to produce those acorns that we're looking for. It's not that difficult. So yeah, got a lot of work to do here. Cody, yeah. One thing when you're doing crop tree release is that you never think about the now. And we always tend to think about the now because of the acorns that can be produced right away and etc. But it is not about the now. It's always about the future. I tell my clientele that all the time. But in this situation, it is about the future. Here we have a young oak sapling who's all bent over. And why is it bent over, you know, from the other trees? It's fighting for that sun. That sun is energy, and it's great to be outside because right now there's a barred owl just going to town. It is awesome. It's awesome out in the woods. But anyway, so yeah, it's fighting for sun, and it's just simple management. It's just no bigger, it's no different than the bigger trees. Release these softwood trees. That's its competition. So that way it has sun, it has room to grow. And obviously, will we get value out of this? Probably not. Not in our lifetime. But again, as great land stewards, it's never about the now. It's always leaving it better in the future in a healthy stand. But as we see, this tree, it has leaves on. And for people that, and occasionally myself, I don't know all the time because I'm forgetful. What's great about oak saplings is that they hold their leaves. So usually when you see this stuff, it's usually an oak tree, and especially when you get to see the leaf, you can say, well, I don't know what species it is, but it is an oak tree. But that will help you indicate what trees to release and what to keep. But fun fact, why do these oak trees leave their leaves on so late? Now, the theory, not saying it's true, but the theory is basically a predator, what would you say, protection. Back in the day, the old mastodon and mammoth and all that stuff, there was a lot of predators, sloths, and the leaves would protect this tree, you know, the buds and everything else. So, and then you hear that? It was also, a lot of species didn't want to hear that because there were other predators preying on those predators that were eating this. So that's the theory. But today, obviously, we don't have those, but we have white-tailed deer that will eat the buds and stuff like that and slow the process down. So it's pretty neat that the leaves stay on, and people think that it's more of a predator protection type thing. So fun fact for today. But again, it's always about the future, never about the now. Pay attention to these saplings, these seedlings that's on the ground, etc. So we can keep this oak, hickory, oak in general going for the long term. Today we learned that doing simple management practices like a crop tree release, when you pull back the layers, there is so much more that we can do for wildlife. It's mind-blowing what we can do, and just simply by going in there and doing X, Y, and Z. But remember, this is supposed to be fun. Have a good time, smile, and I'm sure just like you, and it is for me, wildlife. It's our way of life.